Now that we know a bit about React, we're going to build out our front end in this section. Our plan is to set up routes, connect our client to our server, and to learn a bit more about React along the way. In this video, we'll learn about routing and create our first couple of routes. We'll be using React Router, a popular and almost de facto standard library for routing in React. Let me give you a quick tour of how it works and how you're expected to implement it. Now, first off, you need to install the library, of course. Then, import the browser router component from the React Router DOM package. I'm using the as keyword to rename the component to router for easier usage and understanding. Then, include it in your code as a top-level component. Every other component from this package has to be below the router in the hierarchy. Then you can import the route component and set up your routes. Here we have a simple route that will render some home page component on the root route. Now there is a bit of a problem with client-side routing that we have to talk about. You see, it's very easy to define a set of patterns that all match a single URL. Now to see what I mean, observe these three. If we visit the /about page, all three of these would render. Now to solve this issue, we import the switch component and use it to wrap our routes. Then, the first rule to match the given URL will be the one that gets rendered. Finally, to create links that help us navigate, we simply import the link component and use it as a regular anchor tag, except that the prop for the navigation is called to, not href. So, let's add this library to our project. We'll start by installing the React Router DOM package as a dependency. Now I've gone ahead and I've already implemented the things that we just talked about. As you can see, our app.js is a lot smaller now because I've removed all of the inputs and form logic. You see, I've created two routes as well as a catch-all route that will display a not found page. I'm using the prop exact to specify that I want the route to only be shown if the URL is an exact match. Now, my home component here is really just a component that will render my product list. The other link is used to get to the form demo, which contains the full example that we made in the previous section. And the catch-all route will render a simple not found message. Okay, so far so good. And if we test it out, it'll work as you might expect. Now, if you're following along with the Git history as you watch these videos, I'm going to have two separate commits for this one. The work we have done so far will be in the first one. The second one will have a lot more content. So let me apply that one from the stash and show you some more cool stuff we can do with React Router. As you can see, I've added a bunch of new routes, but the components themselves don't do anything special. They just display the title. Now, the more interesting one is this category route. As you can see, it actually matches a dynamic parameter. Now, this component will print out the value of the parameter. The value is located within the params object, which itself is part of the match object, which is a prop that our component received. All components that are embedded into a route will receive certain props. Let's log the props object to the console and inspect it. So it would appear that there are three props passed down to us by React Router. The history object might be useful to you because it has navigation methods such as go back and go forward. The location object has information about the current location. And the match object is very interesting because it has information on how the current route got matched. And here we have both the spec and the value of the path, as well as any params that the path might have. And by the way, if we try to just access the category page without the param, it won't get matched, and it would just be matched as a not found page, since no param was provided. Finally, we'd want some way of navigating all of these pages, such as links. And for that, we're using React Router's link component, of course. I made a navigation bar component just for this purpose. It accepts a prop called isLoggedIn. and based on that, it hides or shows certain options. But hold on a second, where do we add this component? Because you see, if we add it outside of our router component like this, then we will get an error. Remember that we mentioned at the start of the video that we can't use React router components outside of the main router. Okay, so can we add it above the switch then? Well, that won't work either. The router needs to have a single child directly under it. So how about we put it inside of the switch then? Well, by now we should know that this will also not work, since the switch renders only the first thing that it can. Now, the solution for this problem is actually deceptively simple. It's actually staring us right in the face. It doesn't really matter where our div wrapper is, so we might as well place it under the router. And as you can see, we have a bunch of links at the top now, and clicking on them navigates us between pages. But remember, the idea is that this bar can look different for logged in users. So let's set this prop to true and see what happens. So now we have these two links here instead of a count, but they look different than the rest of our layout. And if we check the navigation bar component, we can see that this is because they're wrapped by a div. And because of the syntax here, we actually do have to wrap them with something, but it would be great if we could somehow avoid having that div around them. And it turns out that we can. We'll import something called a fragment from the React package and use it instead of the div. Now if we inspect our element tree, we can see that there is no wrapper around these items. So the React fragment is just a logical wrapper, but it doesn't get transformed into any element. And last but not least, here's the CSS for the navigation bar. Again, we're using Flexbox for the layout.